Hi, and welcome to All Things Yoga. I'm Hillary Lockwood. Why am I obsessed with asana? This is a really important question, right? This goes back way, way back to when yogis first decided that asana had to be a part of what's happening, right? Because they were sitting in stillness and their bodies were actually falling apart, right? So asana is here just so that we can sit still with our own thoughts, right? But we've changed that. And asana is extraordinary. It's one of my favorite parts of the practice. Asana practice makes us feel very alive and awake. There's so much beauty to it. But in the process of that, I think we have to recognize that it's not the only piece. Kleshas, these are our obstacles. And there are five main kleshas. The first obstacle, the first klesha, is avidya. This is misconception. There are so many misconceptions now about this practice, right? And one of them is that it's just asana, is that it's this bouncing around, that it's just this physical practice, which it is not. So, how do we, as traditional yogis, and maybe as studio owners, or as traditional students, how do we weed through all of the misconception to figure out where we need to be to practice traditionally? Well, as a student, always my first suggestion is, especially if you don't have a safe traditional home studio, do your due diligence, right? Go on their website, look at the owner's bio. Every studio carries the energy of that particular owner. And if that tradition jives with you, if you can tell from that bio without the red flags, and that's an episode I did earlier, is writing a bio. If there are no red flags and that bio is legitimate and that teacher's been studying or that owner's been studying traditionally, go. I mean, even the teachers that you take, especially if you're a traveler, right? Like, do your due diligence, because I don't know about you, but for me, I get very frustrated, which maybe becomes part of the yoga. Not maybe, it is part of the yoga. I get very frustrated when I go into a room, even when I've done my due diligence, and let's say that they have a sub or they just don't have the knowledge that they seemed to in their bio. It's hard, life is short, and we want to be able to feel like we're not wasting our time. No practice is a waste of time. I need to be clear about that, because we can go into most rooms. I'm not going to say all, most rooms as traditional yogis and keep ourselves safe and get something out of it. If the philosophy isn't in it, we can, put that in ourselves. We can do our internal work and still be practicing what is true yoga. It's very difficult when the majority of what's being taught out there as yoga is not yoga. We have such an obsession with asana that it becomes this marketing ploy, this marketing tool for studios to then feel as if they have to elaborate on this amazing traditional practice that has 12,099 documented postures, by the way. We don't even, in the most advanced class out there, we don't even scratch the surface of what we could be playing with, doing, etc. But it's this marketing ploy, or this maybe even a marketing strategy of desperation, whatever it is, to feel like we've got to add things to this really pretty perfect system that's been around for thousands and thousands of years to keep our studios alive, et cetera, et cetera. I have this conversation a lot with people that I've trained that own studios, right? Is it okay for me to put this particular class on my schedule because this teacher was trained elsewhere and this is what they do? The answer is no, flat out. I mean, for me, I am a traditional studio. We run traditional practices. And I think what's interesting is that, people are like, well, I want my workout, or, well, I want a hot room, or I want to feel like I've gotten my cardio. You guys, let me tell you, I promise you, in a traditional class, in a studio that's really doing its job, popular yoga doesn't have to compete with, or popular versus traditional. You can come into a traditional studio and feel like you've gotten your workout. The room is going to be plenty hot. I guarantee it. You're going to feel like you've gotten your cardio. Here's the deal though. What's your intention? What's the obsession? We're teaching people in the West, we're teaching people to be competitive and comparative and to have great expectations in their practice. And this is not just because of all the misconceptions on teaching that are being taught and the people that are teaching what they're calling yoga that is not yoga. This is also about that space in us that says harder, faster, stronger. I need to compete to be better. It's also social media, right? Instagram. Oh my God, what amazing postures, what an amazing practice. But that may not be your practice. You have to start where you are. The Maya, the illusion, the avidya, the misconception is so big. Competition and comparison, these are the opposite of yoga. The reason that avidya, misconception, is the first klesha is it because it directly speaks to ahimsa, which is the first yama, the first rule of yoga, kindness, nonviolence. You cannot be competitive and comparative without being unkind to yourself. If you're comparing yourself to other people, that is unkind to you and where you truly are. What is the obsession? Where are you trying to go? If you're competing with someone else in the room, and be honest, because that little tinge in you that decides to throw your body into a handstand when you're not ready to do that, that's competition. And that's unsafe for you. But where is that coming from? Taught, told, shown in our society and in many studios are saying, hey, yeah, come in and compete. Come to our yoga sculpt class. Come to our yoga with weights class. Come to our yoga with step class. I don't even know what the hell is happening. None of that is yoga. Yoga has enough going on without you having to add weights to it. If you can't hold your body in Phalakasana in a true plank for 10 minutes solid, there's no reason to add weights. Side plank, Vashisthasana, float, hold your half handstand. You guys float to Bakasana, find an arm balance, stay there for 5 minutes. If you can't lift and maneuver and navigate your own physical structure, why would you add more complication to it? But also, listen, there's nothing wrong with lifting weights. There's nothing wrong with sculpt. There's nothing wrong with, lifting. It isn't yoga. And let's be honest. And you can call me a purist as far as my tradition goes, which is probably true. But at the end of the day, yoga, traditional yoga, again, has been here for thousands and thousands of years. Why? Because it works. Because their obsession was not with asana. Their obsession became self-transcendence. Their obsession became self-realization. Their obsession became, how do I begin to clear this chitta-vritti, this busy, this chaos from my mind, from the everyday bullshit that we all deal with, so that I can feel freer, so that I can be happier, so that I can feel like a more complete, powerful, generous human. The kindness is in letting go of the competition and comparison. The kindness is in the letting go of the expectation. The kindness is in letting go of the ego that pushes you into those places that add to something that is already working. But this comes to a much bigger problem, right? This constant reaching for outside things to satisfy. And as a studio owner, believe me, it is hard to be a traditional studio owner. And even though I fully believe you're going to come in and you're going to get all the sweat you need, you're going to get your ass kicked thoroughly in the best ways, you're going to leave feeling complete. But in the mix of all that, you're going to be asked to look at the busyness of your own mind. In the mix of all that, you're going to be asked to look at your own inner work and what you need to do to not only feel better, but be a better human in the world, to shed the unnecessary, to shed the taught, told, shown, to try to shed the duality of who we are in the world and then in the room on the mat. Yoga is a complete system, and not in a dogmatic way, in a yes, show up as you are in the most realistic, tangible way that it could possibly be. Show up as you are. Stop expecting something different to happen. That expectation, what happens in the room of yoga, those are choices from you. Are you digging deep enough? Are you allowing the practice, the true practice, to shift the mountains out of the way that need to be moved? Or are you continuously putting more mountains in the way with competition and comparison, with this idea that, oh, well, I was on Instagram yesterday and I saw so and so do this thing that I want to play with. And you play and it doesn't happen, and you do it and it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. This level of expectation and competition with that person, as well as now with yourself, leads to incredible disappointment, frustration, and often you coming off of your mat. I encourage you to trust that yoga is going to do its job for you, no matter how miserable a practice may be, no matter how hard it is, or how much you might struggle in that practice, how much you might feel unsteady, uneasy, uncomfortable with the stillness, how much you might feel as if you need to be fidgeting around instead of just stopping and being still. If you let it, it's going to do its job. And it's going to ask you to look inside of yourself and to ask all the right questions. Am I kind? Am I honest? Am I being clear with myself and navigating this incredible vehicle in a way that is healthy and from a clear, clean intention? Let go of the obsession with asana. I practice asana 5 days a week. Love it. Absolutely love it. But I sit in meditation every single day because I know that that is what shifts me into a better state of mind more quickly. And yes, is meditation more difficult? Without question. But that also means that that's where the deep, silent work can happen. Asana will move these same mountains out of the way, but you've got to come in with a clear perspective. If you can't get on social media and follow, be mindful of who you follow as well. Follow true yogis that, are demonstrating that their practice isn't always perfect, that are speaking briefly about the honesties of the practice, right? Follow what feels as if they're coming from true intention. If you feel that you're following someone who's just doing fancy postures from an ego space and just showing off, that is not pure intention from them or for you. So there are ways to beautifully use social media to be in the practice, to encourage more people to practice, more people like you to share your story. But let's please let go of this obsession with an asana practice that is trying to get somewhere. I promise you, if you're trying to get somewhere in asana, the asana is going to stay away from you. I see this happen all the time. And a posture will literally run away from you the harder you chase it. It's like anything else. As teachers, and I have this conversation with my teacher trainees all the time. It's really important to recognize where you're teaching. If you consider yourself to be a true teacher of this practice, then where you choose to teach needs to have that integrity. You need to be able to teach a complete practice, which means beginning meditation, shavasana at the end, always, which means honoring the states of Om and the fact that Om has 3 states of consciousness involved in it, and that it creates the sealing of the practice at the end that allows the pieces that you need to keep to stay in, and those pieces that need to be shared to be released out into the world. Same with shavasana. A practice is incomplete without that final corpse pose, which is about the death of the past and the welcoming of your present self, that state of self that creates your own newness, new state of mind, new recognition of the honoring of the body, that new state of spirit, soul, of feeling empowered in who you are, right? Find those places that allow you to teach with integrity. And I implore you, as studio owners, and an owner now 20 years this year, teaching 35 years, I implore you to not give in. Nothing is more important. If you give in to putting classes on your schedules that are not yoga, if you give in to putting classes on your schedule that send a confusing message, because if you're trying to teach a traditional class and you have classes on your schedule that are not at all traditional, that sends a very confusing message to your student base and to what they may be trying to do or trying to seek. There is enough happening in the practice for you to trust it and let it do its job. What does this mean? If you've gone down that road already, restructure. You're the owner. There's nothing wrong with restructuring, and you can do that in the kindest ways. I don't hire outside of my own training for this reason, and it doesn't mean that there aren't great trainings. There are amazing trainings, but I don't want the language to be confusing for the students when the language is the same, when the dissection of the postures is the same, when the alignment that's being taught is the same. The students don't get confused. There isn't conflicting instruction. So I think as owners, it's really important to know that you're going to struggle through those moments, where so-and-so opens 2 miles down the road and they've got bounce around yoga and they're playing loud music and they're blindfolded and they've got their 10-pound weights next to them. Those are fleeting. I will quote my teacher, Chuck Miller, when he says there's room for all of it, because one of those classes could potentially create a spark in someone that says, you know what, I think there's more to this. And they decide to seek out a traditional studio. What we have always as yogis, and this, my teacher, Madhya Ezrati, in the majority of her interviews, literally popular yoga versus traditional yoga. It doesn't have to be one or the other, but it's still happening because of these reasons, because that level of unsafe yoga is being taught. If you go into a room where they give you a sequence and then tell you to do it on your own, who's the teacher? Who's teaching? You've just paid for a teacher and no one's teaching. This is not safe for you. Who's keeping you safe? Who's aligning your practice? There are so many choices to make as students, as teachers. And I think it comes down to the age-old tradition of this practice in trusting that it's enough. and in trusting that it has you, and that, yes, you will get strong as hell. Yes, you will be able to do miraculous things with your body. Yes, the flexibility you will gain will be incredible, but even more. Yes, your mind will begin to clear. Your stress levels will lower. The chemistry of your brain begins to change. And so the way that you process your life, your challenges, your fears, your sadnesses, your losses become different. There is a structure to this practice that allows you to learn how to process the challenges of life in a more graceful way. That is not going to happen in a dark room with loud music and a 10-pound weight next to you. Let go of the obsession with asana. Be as you are. Be still. Allow your practice, whether it's asana, meditation, pranayama, to simply unravel itself. Don't start pulling at it, right? Think about like when you pull a string of something and you end up making a knot just tighter and tighter. Let it simply unroll and unravel itself, because it will. Don't constantly seek harder, faster, stronger, when maybe what you need to be doing is stopping, is finding stillness, is allowing it, yourself, you, to sweetly unravel. All right. Shanti, Shanti. We'll see you in the studio.